Our village is full of unsatisfied women. My mother and sister are the living icons among them. I watched different men come in and out of my mother and sister's room. My mother said, "Men are the best tonic for women." Until one day I opened the room. There was no figure of my mother on the bed, only flower petals scattered on the ground. My sister was very happy. She held the flower petals and laughed, saying that we have more flowers at home. My mother and my elder sister are the most beautiful celebrities in our Yenu village. They are both very beautiful, with skin as white as cream and a unique body fragrance, which attracts men from outside to linger in our beauty village. At dawn, two strange men lifted the curtain and came out of my mother and sister's room. They smiled at each other, put their arms around each other's shoulders and talked about how great their performance was last night. Looking at the satisfaction on the men's pale faces, I lowered my head to hide the disgust in my eyes. These two men were not the only men of my mother and sister. They stared at me as I passed by and teased me with obscene words, but I ignored them. Deep down, I had long been accustomed to the stench of desire that permeated men's bones. I quickly fetched the water and went to my mother's room first. My mother didn't sleep and she didn't even cover herself with a blanket. She just lay limply on the bed, staring blankly out the window. Her body is extremely beautiful, every inch of her skin is extremely white, tight and delicate, and you can't tell at all that she has two daughters. I came to her side with water and said, "Mom, let me help you wipe your body." Mother hummed twice, which was considered as a response. I didn't dare make a sound and wiped my mother's body gently. My mother's body is thin and soft, which is very popular among men. Last night, the man roughly left several purple scars on her body. It's like a large piece of plum blossoms blooming on her body, charming and alluring, making people want to add a few more strokes. But when I saw it, I just felt my scalp tingling. I couldn't imagine how much effort the man had put in last night. I kept changing the water and wiping it carefully, even leaving the gaps between my fingers, trying my best to remove all the unpleasant smells and traces they left on my mother's body. But my mother acted as if she didn't feel anything and let me do whatever I wanted. When I gently wiped the delicate red mole on my mother's collarbone with a wet towel, it seemed like I touched something, and my mother suddenly made a shameful sound. My body began to twist like a flower swaying in the wind. If I were a man, I would not be able to hold back. I calmed myself down and said, "Mom, I can't wipe your body like this." Mother stopped talking and turned around. She was extremely beautiful, just like those beauties in the bookstores. At this moment, she looked at me, her watery eyes sucked me in, and her eyes were full of teasing and mockery that was not suitable for a woman of this age. She smiled sweetly and said, "My dear little sister, your sister has gotten it, why haven't you gotten it yet?" I understood what my mother was saying. A month ago, my sister let a man into her room for the first time with great fanfare. From that day on, different men would come in and out of her room every day, and my sister's body was often covered with scars, but she never got tired of it. Because mother has told us more than once, men are the best tonic for women. My sister listened to mother very much. There were more and more men in her room and she became more and more beautiful. Her every move was full of seductive charm. She once said to me with regret, "Little sister, why don't you listen to your mother? The taste of a man is very wonderful." But I couldn't understand what my sister said at all. "Mom, it's not that I'm not smart, it's that men just look down on me," I replied, pretending to be sad, so that Mom wouldn't keep talking about how the daughter of Aunt Wong next door brought 5 men to the village as soon as she came of age, or how many records my sister had broken. What's so difficult about this? Just wait in the woods during a rainstorm and there will always be a man who will take pity on you. Just let him take you home and everything else will be easy, right? My mother was still chattering on about how to seduce a man into bed, but when she saw that I didn't say anything, she could only sigh and lie down on the bed obediently. "Forget it, your sister and I can still support you." Mother was trying to give me a way out. Because in our village there are women like mother and sister. Except me. My mother and sister can always move freely among men. All the women in the village can do this except me. Whenever the women in the village got together to discuss which man could make them fly to the clouds in a minute, I could only stand aside and act stupid. "What are you thinking about standing at the door?" My sister's voice brought me back to my senses. I hurried in and rubbed my sister's body. Her skin was tenderer and whiter than my mother's, and the injuries were more obvious. "Little sister, be gentle, that man last night was really something handsome and playful." She curled her lips with a dazed look in her eyes, still thinking about everything that happened last night. To her, men were like delicious meals. She just needs to taste each dish carefully and make her own comments on them. I thought about it and whispered to my sister, "Sister, won't you get into trouble if you do this?" My sister was stunned for a moment and then laughed. "Little sister, are you confused?" She looked at me with undisguised ridicule in her eyes. "It's something we both agreed on, why bother with it? Besides, he's feeling better than me, maybe he'll come begging me again in a few days." Thinking of what happened last night, my sister's skin turned pink and she fell into intoxication again. I didn't dare to interrupt her, so I could only lower my head and wipe her body. The sister's half-open eyes were dark and unclear. "Little sister, sometimes I admire you. What are you envious of?" I looked up at her and asked in confusion. My sister snorted and laughed and said nothing more. My sister said she admired me, but I was clearly an outcast in the village. I couldn't bring back any man and made no contribution to the village. Every night, countless evocative sounds float above the village, as if in a relay race, vying to overtake. My sister said, "Don't think too much, go get some sleep and then go water the flowers." I knew my sister was trying to get me to leave. There is a flower field in the middle of the village. There are all kinds of flowers in full bloom, and they are extremely beautiful in spring, summer, autumn and winter. The women in the village cherish them very much and take care of them with all their strength, just like raising their own children. I am the most attentive one. Since I cannot bring a man back, I can only loosen the soil, water and weed them frequently. I don't know if those flowers understand human nature, but every time I pass by, they sway towards me in unison as if vying for my favor. It was extremely quiet all around me. I indulged myself in the fragrance of the flowers, but suddenly a thorn pricked my index finger. The next second I heard the sound of a man and a woman making out. The swaying flowers in front of me grew up slowly and turned into human forms. They were naked, both men and women. Suddenly I was surrounded by naked men and women, staring at me. She reached out her hand and tried to pull me into the flower field. "Come and play, little sister." The woman rushed over and hugged me, her soft breasts pressed against my head. "Little sister, come and play. Come and play." They surrounded me and my head, hands and feet were all shackled by different people. I was terribly scared. But the people around me were shouting in unison, strangely, "Come and play. Come and play." The voices of men and women came at me like an overwhelming force, crazy and scary, and continued without stopping. My consciousness became so blurred that I was almost suffocating. As I walked through the crowd, I saw two figures standing not far away. They were my mother and sister. They just watched the fire from the other side of the river and refused to save me. The mother said to her elder sister, "See, I told you that I could do better than you. Maybe I could break the record of Yan Village next time." My sister's eyes were terribly cold. "That's all. I can do it too." As she said that, she walked towards me. As he walked, a piece of clothing fell off his body with every step. "Don't want." I screamed, finally breaking free from the restraints, and rushed over desperately to put on my sister's clothes. But when I opened my eyes, there was no naked man and woman or my sister taking off her clothes. There was only my sister sitting at the head of the bed with a sullen face looking at me. "What did you dream about?" My sister's eyes are so sharp that I feel like she can see through me from the inside out. I didn't dare lie to her. "I dreamed of flowers in a field and they turned into naked women and men." After hearing my description, my sister's eyes suddenly lit up and she looked me up and down several times as if she was looking at her prey. She laughed so loudly that her voice was so sharp and piercing that it seemed to pierce through the whole house. "My mother and I originally thought that you were still young and had no interest in men. It turns out that you like this kind of excitement. I heard that the women in the village had held a grand carnival in the village. Countless men and women did all kinds of ridiculous things around the bonfire. No matter how much my mother and sister couldn't control themselves, they just closed the door in their rooms. My sister put her arm around my shoulders and whispered in my ear, "Since you want to, why don't I give you a man tonight?" "No. I didn't, I never thought so." I shook off my sister's hand. My sister sneered and slapped me in the face. "Pretending to be noble. You think you're so great, but you're actually more dissolute than me and my mother. You can pretend now, but when a man really comes to your bed, you might even thank me." "I don't." I felt inexplicably panicked and scared and quickly got out of bed. "Sister, I remembered that I have something to do. I'm going to water the flowers first." After saying that, I quickly left the house. As soon as I opened the door, I bumped into my mother. My mother gently supported me as I was about to fall. "Little sister, be careful." I looked up at my mother in a daze, and remembered the image of her lying naked on the bed, and I couldn't tell which one was the real her. "Mom? I'm fine. I'll go out and water the flowers first." Mom looked at me running away quickly, still a little puzzled. She turned around and asked my sister, Did you bully her? How could I dare to bully her? It's obvious that she is about to come to her senses. Mother shook her head helplessly. I told you a long time ago, don't impose our ideas on my little sister. My little sister is different from us. The elder sister turned her back and whispered, of course it's different. My little sister is getting wise. Big things will happen soon. Since a man entered my sister's room a month ago, she has become more and more strange. In the past, my sister was as gentle and considerate as my mother, or even more so. Every time she went out, she would bring me all kinds of small things. But after she started having sex with the first man, she seemed like a different person. She would just stay in the house and keep urging her mother to bring her a man. Next to the flower field, the village chief Jenna was watering the flowers carefully. Jenna liked me very much and once said that she wanted to take me in as her goddaughter. Hey, isn't this Sophia's little sister? Jenna smiled at me. Come to water the flowers? I nodded, and after thinking for a while, I asked Jenna, why do women in our village have to have men in their houses? Jenna said, because you haven't tried it yet, you don't know how wonderful it tastes. She smacked her lips, and I guessed she must have had a wonderful night last night. Jenna paused, then continued, most importantly, this is for the continuation of our village. The continuation of the village? Then I realized it. My sister had sex with a man day and night for a month. The same thing happened to my mother, and I couldn't even tell how long her condition lasted. But for such a long time, my mother and sister never got pregnant. Not only that, but it could be said that all the women in the village never got pregnant. Terrible thoughts took root in my mind and I didn't have time to sort out my thoughts. I quickly asked Jenna, why have I never seen anyone pregnant, but there are always new lives being born in the village? Jenna just smiled at me and looked at the flower field without saying anything. I followed her gaze to the flowers blooming in the field. Thinking about my previous absurd dream, I realized that these flowers not only grew well, but also never withered or died. Jenna handed me a candy and smiled at me. As long as the village can continue, it doesn't matter to us what the process is. Besides, love between men and women is the nature of our generations of women in the village. It's absurd yet reasonable. Our family of 3 grew up in such an environment. Little sister, stay with your mother. I nodded heavily and quickened my hands. My mother was very kind to me. The women in our village did not eat rice and often ate dew under the sun. I was never full, so my mother would stuff me with all kinds of small cakes to fill my stomach. My sister was stingy and would only feed me all kinds of unpalatable flower petals. Mom is the best person in the world. When I opened my mother's room again, I didn't see my mother lying on the bed in all her charm. All that was left in the room were countless petals of various colors scattered all over the bed. I panicked and ran to find my sister. Sister, something bad has happened. My sister stood in front of my mother's bed, looking at the petals, with an expression that didn't tell whether she was happy or angry. After a long while, she finally recovered and suddenly knelt in front of the bed, holding the flower petals and laughing. We finally have more flowers to plant at home. Mom, after all these years, you can finally give birth to flowers again. My sister held the flower petals and murmured, plant flowers, plant flowers. Yes, I have to hurry up and plant the flowers. I can't waste the best time. As she said that, my sister rolled up the bed sheet and ran out in a hurry, holding a bed sheet full of flower petals. And I have hidden in my hands the one and only red petal. The flower field was already crowded with people. It seemed as if everyone knew that mother would turn into petals today. When they saw my sister, they all made way for her. Village head. The sister looked at Jenna, unable to hide the joy on her face. My mother has given birth to a baby, and our family has completed reproduction. You can set us free. Jenna looked at the bed sheet in her sister's arms, as if she was looking at her former mother. Your mother has done a great job. You and your little sister don't have to stay in the village any longer. My sister was so happy that she couldn't help laughing. The women in the village were also infected by her happiness and started laughing with her. Their laughter became more terrifying. I asked in bewilderment, Sister, what is going on? Where's Mom? Where did she go? My sister frowned and turned away without looking at me. Jenna said, Sophie, I thought you knew this a long time ago. She said, don't you understand? As a woman in Yan village, your only mission is to continue to reproduce. And your mother has completed her mission, and now she can finally rest. There was kindness in her eyes as she looked at the pile of petals, as if she was saying to her mother, just have a good rest. My sister ignored me too. As long as my mother's petals sprout, our mission will be accomplished. She looked at me and held my hand as if she was encouraging me and herself. It only takes a few days for us to get out of here. Sophia's little sister, the reason why our village is looking for men everywhere is for the reproduction of the village. It is very difficult for us in Yam village to have children. We can only succeed by constantly looking for men through trial and error and finding the most suitable man. Men are our best supplement. My mother's petals were planted in the flower field, and my sister and I stayed here all the time. My sister said that as long as the petals sprout, our family's mission will be completed and we can leave the village. My sister and I took turns guarding the flower fields at night. In a daze I felt the person next to me get up and walk out. But I was so sleepy that no matter how hard I tried to open my eyes, it was no use. It was as if someone was forcibly holding my eyelids to make me fall asleep. The wind at night was terribly cold and it was easy to catch a cold if I wasn't careful. I curled myself up into a ball trying to keep myself warm. Sudden. My limbs were entangled by the soft and strong roots of the flowers, and the cool touch made me wake up instantly. When I opened my eyes, Jenna was standing in front of me, looking down at me, her fingers running up and down my brow bone and cheek. Jenna, you. My scalp was tingling with fear. I kicked hard, trying to get rid of the roots. But the harder I tried, the tighter they got, digging deep into my flesh, making it impossible for me to escape their control. Jenna let me struggle and smiled indifferently. Your sister gave you to me a long time ago in order to be free. At that moment, I immediately understood what she meant. Could it be that all this was arranged by my sister? I looked at Jenna in front of me and forced my brain to calm down. My body had just been drugged and I had no strength left. We can only wait for the best time. Jenna admired my lost and frustrated expression with satisfaction and leaned over to take a closer look. I used all my remaining strength to stab my freed fingers into her eyes with such force that Jenna's eyes bled. I was very glad that I watered the flowers plenty of the time, allowing the roots of the flowers to quickly absorb blood and slowly pull away from my limbs, allowing me to deliver a fatal blow. Jenna immediately covered her eyes and rolled on the ground in pain. Taking advantage of this moment, I quickly got up. I didn't care about anything else and stumbled out. Tonight, the women did not indulge in tenderness, but instead held torches. I hid in the dark and heard the women's conversation. Sophie's little bitch hurt the village chief and disappeared. Go and catch her. She drank the medicine. How did she escape? Who knows? Anyway, we have to find her quickly. The torchlight was getting closer and closer, and there was a narrow gap behind me. If I went in, I would be stuck. But if I didn't go there, I would be discovered by the women who came around the corner. At the critical moment, a secret door suddenly opened under the wall next to the gap. Before I could react, a hand pulled me down. Be quiet. It's my sister's voice. I turned my head, but my sister's face was not clear in the underground passage, but her hand, which was tightly held in mine, was cold. Elder sister. My sister seemed to be looking me up and down, sniffing me, and then she let out a sigh of relief after confirming that there was no damage to my body. I know everything. I didn't expect them to drug you. They must have used some strange pollen after I left. It makes people feel weak after smelling it. She smiled, and her smile seemed to be mocking. You don't want to run away when you see me? Aren't you afraid that I planned all this? Sister, we are sisters, I believe you. I stared at my sister and said word by word. My sister fell silent and avoided my sight. The surroundings fell into an eerie silence. Go to the basement and look for it. The noise outside grew louder again. Go? Before I could think about it, my sister grabbed my hand and ran away. The basement was dimly lit and the ground was slippery, so I couldn't take a single step. But my sister kept holding my hand and I kept following her steps. Even though I couldn't see her face clearly, I could feel that my sister was very nervous. The trampling above my head continued, and from time to time I could hear distant voices coming from the basement. I gasped and asked my sister, "Where are we going?" My sister replied, "Get out of this damn place." Escape? Why escape? Even though my sister and I tried desperately to escape, we were blocked at the entrance of the village. Jenna's eyesight was healed again, and she could even talk to me with a smile while standing in the cold wind. Little sister, you are such a good runner. It's really hard for us to find you. After saying that, she looked at her sister with a cold face. Don't you always hate this sister? We finally offered her to our village and you stab us in the back? My sister looked at the women in front of her. Almost all of them ran out naked without even having time to put on shoes before they ran out to catch me. I couldn't help but complain, Jenna? Why does it have to be me? My sister stood in front of me. I couldn't see her expression. I just saw her body stunned. Jenna's eyes flickered between my sister and me and she laughed. I thought you two were sisters with deep affection. Turns out you were kept in the dark. Didn't your sister tell you? My sister's hand in my hand was as cold as a death, with no warmth at all. Do you think you are the treasure of the village? Your mother and your sister have started sleeping with other men. Can you still be a good girl in this village? It's your mother and sister who are trying their best to protect you. There have only been women in our village since ancient times, because we are all beautiful women. She opened her arms and looked at me with mercy like a god. Your mother and your sister were all born from petals except you. I remember now. The flowers in the flower field are actually planted by separate families. The flowers in other houses correspond to the population except mine. I once asked my mother, why are there 3 people in our family but only 2 flowers? Mother touched my head gently to comfort me. Because I haven't found a flower as lovely as my little sister yet, I'll plant it for my little sister when I find one later, okay? I was so happy that I immediately said yes. But it turns out that the flower was not planted there just because it looks pretty. It was my mother and sister. Jenna continued. The only mission of the women in our village is to turn into petals and give birth to seeds to ensure the continuation of our village. After mating with men, women need to take special medicine to prevent pregnancy with human beings. But who would have known that more than 10 years ago, your mother did not take medicine after having sex with one of the men? Just that one time your mother got pregnant with a human? As a beautiful woman, if you have an abortion, it will cause great harm to your body and will most likely affect your future reproduction. Your mother had no choice but to give birth to you. We originally agreed to drown you after you were born. But why do you look so much like your father? She softened her heart at the first sight. I see. This is how I was born. No wonder all the women in the village can't stop doing that kind of thing. Girls of my age have gone from being forced to being willing. Only me, my mother wouldn't force me to do that kind of thing. Because I am not the same kind of person as them. I'm not a nympho at all. Jenna looked back at her sister and laughed. Your sister is not your mother's daughter. To be more precise, she is your aunt's daughter. Otherwise, she would have turned into a petal long ago. How could she have the chance to live until now? She was born a beautiful woman, and it was absurd for her to fall in love with a man. If he hadn't been thinking about her flower planting, he would have burned her alive long ago. Sophia's eldest sister, don't you hate and be jealous of your sister? When you knew the truth, didn't you curse your sister to death every day? Why are you running away with her now? My sister bent her shoulders and buried her head deeply. Could it be that you also like your sister's physique and know that eating her will make your body softer and happier, so you want to take her for yourself? Get lost. My sister stared at her fiercely but couldn't say anything else. Maybe it was because what Jenna said was exactly what she was thinking. But I don't care. I held my sister's hand, tightening it. My sister was startled and turned to look at me in disbelief. I stepped forward and stood in front of my sister, opening my hands to protect her. Jenna tooted her tongue and said, I thought if you cooperated with me, I would be gentle with you, but you insisted on going against me. Don't blame me for being rude. Countless women rushed towards me and my sister. Fortunately, my sister and I were quick-witted and grabbed a large shovel nearby to block the people rushing towards us. Don't hurt the little one, knock him out and bring him over. As for the big one, Jenna looked at her sister and smiled seductively, kill those who don't listen. Everyone who had a grudge against her sister cheered and rushed towards her. I knew that my sister usually spoke venomously and harshly, which had offended many people. But when I saw the people gathered around my sister, I realized how many people she had offended. Elder sister, I screamed. My sister dodged the attack and told me that she was fine. But there were only 2 of us and the other side had more people. A single spit from each of them could drown us. If this continued, my sister and I would never be able to escape. As I was thinking, my sister broke free from the encirclement and ran towards me, holding my hand and running towards the village again. But she had just run for so long that her physical strength had been overdrawn. Now she took 2 steps after running 3 steps. The people behind us were playing tricks on us like a cat playing with a mouse. What should we do? I asked my sister. She shook her head and nodded. I knew what she wanted to say. Flowers in the flower field. When they ran to the flower field, it was already slightly light. The women's skin was abnormally pale due to the cold. They seemed to be insensitive to the cold and surrounded us naked beside the flower field. Jenna said, Sophia's eldest sister, you are so obedient. I really led you here. My sister shook off my hand and knelt in front of Jenna. And I did as I was told. You must give me the holy dew. Charles will come back after drinking it. Charles is my sister's first man. He is very gentle and the only one who is reluctant to leave any scars on her. But before they had done so many times, Charles was drugged by the women in the village just because he was handsome, and was pushed into a flower field and drained to death. At least I have watched you grow up. Don't worry, take care of your sister, and I will definitely give her to you. Ha, what a wonderful show. I clapped my hands. What are you laughing at? You've lived a better life than me since childhood. Mom likes you more than me. Why are you a human? I'm just a nymphomaniac. Neither you nor mother loves me. Only Charles loves me. As long as he can come back, I will do anything. The elder sister laughed crazily. You owe me. There was no expression on my face. In my memory, my sister always compared herself with me secretly. Little sister, you don't have to die. Earlier, I fed you so many flower petals, but you refused to wake up and wasted my good stuff. As long as you open your mind and fall in love with men, and sleep with my Charles for a few times, he will be able to come back to life. You are a human, you can easily absorb the yin energy left in his body by us beauties, so that the yin and yang in his body will be balanced, and he will wake up soon. Why won't you help me? My sister grabbed my shoulders frantically, shook my body, and her eyes were red. Pooh! I spit on her face. Sister, I did it on purpose. I knew long ago that my sister loved her first man terribly. She carried all the women in the village and placed Charles' body in a cave behind a waterfall. She fed him a flower petal every day to keep him alive, hoping that he would come back to life one day. Stop talking nonsense, let's be safe and do it together. As long as we kill Sophia's little sister and bury her under the flower field, all of us will become more fragile and weaker. Jenna couldn't help but give orders. The moment they rushed over, I took out 2 large flints in my hand and rubbed them continuously. In our village there is a clear rule that things that can start a fire are not allowed to appear, and even eating is drinking dew. Now that I think about it, it's probably because the villagers' true bodies are flowers. If I start a fire and burn all these flowers, you will die, right? You dare. Jenna roared. She didn't expect that I could actually get 2 large pieces of flint. But her fear only lasted for a few seconds, and at the end she looked at me with a smile on her face. Ha, Sophia's little sister, I'm not saying that it will take a long time for something like you to catch fire. It's enough time for us to deal with you several times. Jenna, you really understand me. Isn't this just a way to scare you? I am a person who listens to advice. As soon as I finished speaking, I used it as a weapon and threw it at my sister who was closest to me. My sister couldn't dodge in time and was hit by the flint and fainted. Sophia's little sister, I want to see if you have any other ideas? Such an outrageous request? I smiled at her and took out a few lighters from my trouser pocket. These were things that had never appeared in the village before, and only a few women had seen them. The women looked around and asked what these were. Jenna had already recognized it and screamed, "Impossible! How could you have this thing?" I shook the lighter in my hand and said, "You deserve it. Such good things must have fallen from those men." I kept a few of them out of curiosity. After that, I lit all the lighters. While Jenna was trying to control her expression, I threw the lighters into the flower field. The flames quickly grew higher. No one knew that when Jenna arranged for my sister and I to plant the petals of the mother's flower, I took the opportunity to sprinkle a lot of mineral powder that would burn when exposed to fire around the flower field. As the flowers burned, Jenna and the others started to catch fire, and they couldn't put it out no matter what they did. Jenna looked at me with a crazy look in her eyes. As the head of the Yan village, her roots were big and thick. Seeing that the fire on her body could not be put out, she rushed over and tried to use her roots to wrap me tightly and die with me. At this moment, my sister woke up. I thought she would force me to take credit, but she quickly pushed me away and hugged Jenna tightly, and the flames swallowed her together. In the last moments of my life, I heard a sentence. "I'm sorry, little sister." My sister and Jenna and her group burned very quickly and turned into ashes in an instant. The color of my sister's ashes was very special, a striking white. I stood there, carefully collecting my sister's white ashes. Over the past decade or so, my mother and sister have been unable to go against their nature as beautiful women and could only repeatedly fulfill their so-called responsibility to reproduce offspring. And I have long known that as long as the roots and stamens of the flowers are cut off when the beautiful girls reach adulthood, they will not be restricted by their nature and can move freely in and out of the village. I held my sister's ashes and went to our old house, where I found a precious wooden box from under the bed. Open it with one hand, and there is a gorgeous red petal inside. I mixed my sister's ashes with red soil and planted the petals in it. I followed the steps to take care of the flowers in the flower fields and took good care of them. Not long after, the red flower sprouted and grew. Miraculously, 2 flower buds grew on one stem, one red and one white. I knew they were my mother and sister. When I asked about their identities, the two flowers nodded in the wind. Another month passed and the two flowers bloomed at the same time. I couldn't wait to cut off the roots and stamens of the flowers, giving them the joy of pursuing freedom and no longer becoming monsters controlled by nature. My mother and sister hugged me gently from the front and back and whispered in my ears, "Little sister, we are back."